Now, the Buckeye Extra podcast with Rob Oller, Bill Rabinowitz, and Joey Kaufman from the Columbus Dispatch.
Hello, listeners. Welcome back to the Buckeye Extra football podcast. It's Monday, November 25th. It's officially Ohio State-Michigan week. It's Thanksgiving week, and we're also going to break down last Saturday's top 5 win as Ohio State took Indiana and won in convincing fashion, 38-15. So we'll talk about that game. We'll look ahead to Michigan. This will count as a sort of a both preview pod and a look back pod. And Bill and Rob are going to have some special guests on later in the week. But figured I'd give you a programming note for the holidays and we get into things here.
Thanks, Joey.
You're welcome, Bill.
Do I have to say thanks? I guess I have to say thanks too.
No, you don't have to.
I look like a total heel. Happy Thanksgiving, pre-Thanksgiving, everyone. There,
you beat us to the punch there.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I guess we should just dive into Indiana. This was, first of all, I thought Indiana was mostly legit. I think Ohio State just kind of, first of all, if you don't have the 2 punt plays, the botched snap, or catch off the snap, and then Caleb Downs' return, that's 14 points right there. Now, that's not to say Ohio State wouldn't have scored on that last possession of the first half anyway. But they would have had to go 50, 60 yards to do it instead of 7. And of course, Caleb Downs, that was the one. As soon as that happened, I think everyone in the stadium knew this game was over. But I thought until then, Indiana played Ohio State even, 7-7. Ohio State's defense had started to assert itself, but Indiana went right down the field on the first drive, which is it's a pattern here, right? Ohio State's defense shaky early, then they get it together and they're pretty dominating. But then, Ohio State this is what I thought would happen. Ohio State's loaded with 4- and 5-star guys. Indiana's loaded with basically 3-star guys, and this is what happens. But I thought Indiana was, they did not strike me as being a fraud team. They struck me as being a team that had a tough game on the road against opponent that was far better than it ever faced, and they weren't quite ready for it.
Yeah, I would, my Big Ten power rankings, it lines up pretty much how we're looking at it. I've got Oregon number 1, Ohio State number 2. I think Penn State gave the Buckeyes a better game than Indiana did. Obviously, it was 20-13. Now it was over in State College, but that thing wasn't decided till really late. And then you got Indiana. I'm not sure that if Indiana and Illinois played 10 times, I think Indiana probably wins 6 or 7. I don't think they win all of them because I think Illinois is whatever. We don't need to talk about Illinois. I'm just saying Indiana is like the 4th. I think they're clearly the 4th and sometimes the 3rd best team, depending on the day in the conference. And Ohio State took care of business. Like you said, Bill, the punts, the unforced error, the second straight week that Ohio State benefited from an unforced error on a punt, and Northwestern, same thing. That one sailed over a Northwestern punter's head, and I think it was David Adolph.
Yep.
Then blocked it. Went out at the 1. Buckeyes scored. They did what they had to do. I think if you're an Ohio State fan, the best thing here is that all 3 phases, they look pretty sharp. Offensively, yeah, they didn't run the ball real well, which, with this sort of put together offensive line because of the injuries is sort of expected. I think that's going to be interesting against Michigan when we start talking about that game. But then you've got your defense. It's just pretty dominant. And then you've got special teams, which have been getting it done. So that's what you have to feel good about. There's not really a super weakness as a position group or those 3 elements. It's pretty stout.
And it was remarkable how quickly the game changed because when you're talking about the way Indiana came to the horseshoe ready to go, I mean, that opening script they had was real nice. Twice on 3rd down, Curtis Rourke had time to throw, was efficient, kept the chains moving. They targeted Davis and Igbinosun, who was flagged twice on an opening drive for pass interference call. I thought they definitely showed up. But every game Ohio State's played in seemingly its defense, it will take a blow early on, maybe sort of a feeling out phase, And at that point, just a flip switch. I think just the way they brought pressure, because I thought Curtis Rourke looked like a good quarterback. And I thought back to that Oregon game where Oregon had not a 6-year guy, or maybe I can't remember if Gabriel's a 6-year guy, but he's a super senior guy where he's certainly a more experienced guy using the extra eligibility to stay in college. And Rourke maybe had a chance to be in that category, but after that first series that Indiana had, Ohio State, Jim Knowles turned up the pressure. The blitz packages were effective getting to Rourke, and it never seemed like at that point moving forward he had a chance. Just the Indiana offensive line could not pick up what Ohio State was doing as far as sending extra pressure, especially Cody Simon. There were times where one offensive lineman was basically trying to pick between two guys, and that didn't work out. So he only ended up throwing 18 passes for the game, Curtis Rourke. And I think that really just Indiana never really got back in any sort of rhythm offensively. There were certainly the game-changing plays on special teams, but even if those hadn't happened and you were to just play offense, defense, Indiana never was really able to move the ball after that first possession.
Yeah,
I hope I have this right. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think after Indiana's first series and their final series, not counting the one or two plays at the very end, they had like 145 of their 151 yards. So in between the first and the last series, they had 6 yards.
Yeah, they did nothing.
They gained six yards in 90% of the game. That's pretty impressive by Ohio State's defense.
There were 6 drives after the first one. The longest drive was 8 yards, and half of them went backwards. And even the last touchdown drive, when Ohio State was clearly just kind of playing a semi-prevent, soft defense to just not let them score quickly, and it was all backup defensive linemen. The back 7 were starters, but the front 4 were backups. That's when they scored their last touchdown. So the 11 starting, that unit, starting unit, only gave up the 1 score. And that's a pattern. I mean, we saw it against Northwestern. Northwestern had 2 drives at the start of the game, and that was pretty much it. They make adjustments. They still have not given up a touchdown in the third quarter all year. It's been, and the other thing, that the most noticeable thing, especially when I watched it again last night, the blitz packages are really, really effective now. And we saw against Oregon when they tried as Nick Saban called it, the antiquated old four linemen just kind of playing it straight. Now they're bringing Cody Simon, who had 2 sacks. They're bringing Sonny Styles. They're bringing, it's freeing guys up because you can't block that many guys. And good luck trying to block JT Tuimoloau or Jack Sawyer one-on-one. And it's confusing quarterbacks. And some of those, Rourke had no chance. It was like he snapped it, he stepped back and said, duck for cover. And, the one where Cody Simon forced a fumble, that was a big play. And so I think that they've found their groove, which is interesting because it's essentially what Jim Knowles did a lot at Oklahoma State. He's incorporating that kind of unpredictability along with just the talent that he has at Ohio State. I think for a long time he kind of thought, and I think they directed him to be this way. Hey, our guys are better than their guys. Don't get too cute. Well, now after the Oregon game, he's kind of figured out the right mix of kind of unpredictability and just raw talent.
I think this is what people expected when he came to Ohio State from Oklahoma State. His last year in Stillwater, they were really good at getting to the quarterback and creating havoc. Only Alabama had more sacks in 2021 than Oklahoma State did. And so when Jim Knowles came to Ohio State, the hallmark of his defense was its ability to get pressure on the quarterback through blitz packages, and they were a little more exotic. At Oklahoma State, they used some 3-down lineman fronts a little more so certainly than he's done at Ohio State. But they're getting home when they call a blitz. I was looking at the Pro Football Focus numbers for this game, had 10 plays out of 24 dropbacks in which Ohio State sent extra pressure or blitzes. 4 of those resulted in sacks. Another one resulted in Curtis Rourke getting hit while he was attempting a pass. So half the time Ohio State was blitzing was bringing the quarterback down for a loss or at least hitting him. And I think that's really they are blitzing more in recent weeks, but not a dramatic increase. But I think most importantly, when they are blitzing, they're getting to the quarterback because it's not as if the Oregon game they didn't send any pressure. It's just that those guys didn't get home. There were times where they had two guys rushing into the backfield, but they were sometimes running into the same lineman, or just they were taking a path which was long and they couldn't get to the quarterback with enough time. And Dylan Gabriel gets credit for his pocket presence and all that, but the effectiveness in which they're blitzing, I think, is what's really powering them right now.
Ohio State has the number one scoring defense in the country, the number one defense of total yards, and they're second, at least best I can tell, behind Texas in yards per play. I mean, giving up 4.1 yards per play. Texas 3.97. That's that's pretty good. I mean, and the other thing I noticed Saturday, and especially, I just mentioned Cody Simon. I think he and Sonny Styles have raised their game a lot in recent weeks. Sonny Styles now looks like a linebacker and not a guy who's trying to feel his way as a converted safety. Arvell Reese isn't as noticeable, but Day said last week that was his best game. The Northwestern game was his best game. And against Michigan, we're going to talk about that more, but against Michigan, which obviously is a run-oriented offense, that's going to be huge. I mean, you have to be able to, that front seven has got to be very stout because Michigan's passing game isn't very good. And so that's going to put the onus on Michigan to run the ball really well and Ohio State to stop it. And the way those guys are playing linebacker right now, should give Ohio State fans a lot of confidence.
Here's a fun stat from Saturday. Indiana had 151 total yards of offense last year. They had 153 against Ohio State. So all this talk in the last year about Indiana remaking itself under Kirk Cignetti and all the transfers they bring in, look, they're a much better team. They're going to make the college football playoff. It's truly a Cinderella story, and not trying to take away from that. But in a way, it is funny because it's sort of you're back to square one. It's sort of the same offensive output, if you will, against Ohio State, who wins its 30th game in a row over the Hoosiers.
And that was a 23-3 game in the opener last year when both teams were feeling their way. And remember, that was such an ugly slog of a game. It was Kyle McCord's first game as a starter, and nothing kind of worked.
Should we end this Indiana portion with the kneel down controversy or kneel down?
Sure.
Do you want to talk about the kneel down, or should we get into the other? Anything you want to say about special teams or?
Oh, I mean, it was good, right? I mean, Caleb Downs is legit.
That was his signature play.
I admitted I was wrong. I still, in a way, don't like the idea of putting your best player, back to return punts where he can get injured. But hey, the proof was in the pudding in terms of the guy's phenomenal. So I guess the risk was worth the reward, or the reward was worth the risk. There you go. So that's enough on that. And I think he's going to be back there, I guess, forevermore. I mean, at least the rest of this
matters. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's always going to matter from now on. I think so. It was really good. There you go. Again, I wouldn't get too excited about the punt team, just because, again, these were unforced errors for the most part the last two games. It was the Indiana punter dropped the ball, and in Northwestern it was snapped over his head, but I'll give Ohio State credit. They took advantage of it. They did what they had to do. So anyhow, that's the deal. Kneel down. Set the stage there, Billy, in terms of what happened.
Well,
this has been a firestorm, and I contend I wrote about this today. I contend it's like having rabble rousers in the audience, and the rabble rousers are gamblers who are really upset. I would say half upset, half thrilled about what went down. I think it's and Indiana fans who thought they were all that. Suddenly got a little comeuppance and didn't like it. So that's my take on why there's such outrage. Sure, there is like the purist, sportsmanship thing, and I get that, but I think that's being drowned out, at least by Ohio State fans, by score. We want to score. Stick it to Indiana, and that's why you play the game to score. So, Billy, set the.
Well, it's funny. I'm doing this because I was not paying attention at the time because I was writing furiously because I was on deadline. So I didn't even realize.
Never admit that.
Yeah, I'm admitting it. So what happened is Indiana's down 31-7. They score a touchdown with a minute something to go, minute 50 to go, and Kurt Cignetti realizing that if they get a 2-point conversion, then it's a 2-possession game. And even though the odds are maybe, 1 in a million, it's still better than none in a million. Kick it onside kick, recover, score a touchdown, kick it onside kick, recover, two-point conversions. You got a tie game. Is this likely to happen? Once in a lifetime, maybe not even that. But it's mathematically possible, so he does it. They get a 2-point conversion. They try an onside kick. It goes out of bounds. Ohio State runs the ball up the middle. Travion Henderson breaks it. First long run of the game. It's 39. He slides down at the 1. Doesn't take the touchdown, which, it would have been a 3-touchdown game. I know why he did it. Run the clock out fine. That's their strategy. That's what they did against Penn State. Will Howard could have probably scored a touchdown on his last one and took a knee. So Henderson goes down. I think the assumption is, okay, Henderson took a knee. Ohio State's going to take a knee. Well, they didn't. 2 sneaks and Will Howard scores. I did watch. I did watch at the end of the game, and I saw that when Day and Cignetti talked, it seemed cordial. Cignetti gave him a friendly pat on the back. It wasn't like they were jawing at each other. Like sometimes it does happen with coaches. You see that. And Tom Herman got into it, with
just a few
one of
weeks
his
ago.
last games, right? I mean, it does happen. So it didn't seem on the field, from what I could tell from the press box, that there was any real big issue. But yes, the over-under on this game, I think, was 52, and that made it,
52.5.
Okay, well, you know better than I do. So I wasn't even aware of this at the time. I was told this. So the touchdown made it over. And
53.
so there are winners and losers, and and so the sportsmanship and that. And I think, some people might have gotten rubbed the wrong way when Curt Cignetti, when he took the job, his Jim Tressel moment when he said, Purdue sucks and so does Michigan and Ohio State. Maybe that was in the back of somebody's mind. I don't know that.
I think we know that.
It became at least a minor brouhaha, whatever you want.
A kerfuffle.
A kerfuffle.
I would just add this, that I wrote this, and then after I wrote it and it's appeared, I kind of started to think, well, in a perfect situation, I think if you're Ohio State, maybe you sneak it if you really want to score. I mean, this is nitpicking. You sneak it on first down, and if you don't get in, then you take a knee. You kind of give it one shot, but they gave it 2 shots and they scored. I don't have a real problem with it, mainly for this point, that it was if Travion Henderson doesn't slide down, it's 38-15 anyhow.
And nobody says a word.
Nobody says a word. I mean, if he scores, no big deal. It's only because he slid down and then 2 plays later they score. So, it's good. It's good for a discussion. It's good for water cooler talk. But I think it's a little bit much ado about, I won't say nothing, much ado about little. Joey, what'd you think?
Okay, then I want one last comment.
I do think the whole brouhaha, it's going to say brouhaha. Say brouhaha 3 times fast. I'll not do that. The whole thing seems like excessive pearl clutching to me because, I mean, it's a 2-score game. You tack on a 3rd score. It reeks of manufactured faux rage from IU fans. I think Cignetti might have done the same thing if he was in their shoes. Look, I think it's actually more revealing about just the state of Ohio State, the way they finished the game, because they were feeling themselves toward the end of the game. The scoreboard operator put up the whole thing with Cignetti's face on it with the newspaper that said, well, OSU wins, Google it. Will Howard did the little mock impersonation of the Cignetti with the cigarette and pretending to kind of throw
it out.
Down,
he threw it down.
It out. And, I mean, just the mojo, the swagger that Ohio State felt on the sidelines is different than we'd seen from them in recent years. I mean, could you imagine Kyle McCord doing that? So that to me, I thought was maybe revealing about the state of this team is just the way they're kind of feeling themselves down the stretch. And sure, maybe they did rub Indiana's nose in a little bit, but I didn't find it so egregious. These are semi-professional football players at this stage of the way the sport goes. So I think it's fine, and I think it maybe shows Ohio State's got a little more behind
edge,
than it did before.
I will promise you this: if the same situation happens this week, they will not only go for the touchdown, they will go for 2.
No. Yeah, Harbaugh's gone. I don't think. Yeah, that Harbaugh day thing is that's been kind of sealed off. Put in.
All right, let's move on to Michigan. You ready?
I will segue into Michigan this week. I mean, you knew the animosity level between Ryan Day and Jim Harbaugh was high. I mean,
they don't like each other.
These coaches did not like each other. A lot of it starts with the third base comment that Jim Harbaugh made in the 2021 win.
Or hang 100 on him. Let's not forget about that. Ryan Day saying we're going to hang 100 or whatever it was on Michigan.
I guess we've heard one thing said in public, another thing that's been reported to have been said in the call. So it's just always wonder what was.
It's good for the rival. It's good for the rivalry. But
look, the thing I'm wondering about is you knew the rivalry had a little something extra in recent years because these two teams were in the top 5. Both of them stood in each other's way to win a national championship. Both of the coaches did not like each other. Throwing a cheating scandal on top of it. Now, Michigan's unranked. Connor Stalions is not with the program anymore. Jim Harbaugh's not leading the program. I guess by extension, you have Sherrone Moore leading them, who coached in the game last year and was Jim Harbaugh's acting head coach while he was away from the team during his suspension. And you have some people who left Ohio State, and Tony Alford, who's now on the Michigan sidelines. But to me, just maybe it's kind of lost some of the edge with Harbaugh leaving, and now it's Day versus Sherrone Moore. Anyway, it's a new chapter here to the rivalry with a different man leading the maize and blue.
Well, what's also contributed to maybe less animosity, if that's the wrong way to put it, is Ohio State can lose this game; they're still in the playoff. So it's like that's watered things down a little bit to where it used to be for all the marbles. And definitely in a year when you had a 14 playoff, and if this was last year and you'd lose to Michigan, you are out. You were done. Yep. So, now with 12, it's not the end of the world. I do think that because there's one little thing that jumps out, and I think if you're an Ohio State fan, you felt really good about this game, and as good as you can feel given the rivalry. But man, after that 50-6 Michigan beating Northwestern, I think that puts just a little bit of angst. I mean, this is already a very angsty fan base, Ohio State. At 56, because you thought Michigan had no offense, you thought Michigan could not score, and what you've got is 50-6 a week after Ohio State only beat Northwestern. What was it? 31-7? Yeah. So you've got. I'm not saying that's the end, a huge thing, but I think as much anxiety is in this fan base that 50-6 caught some attention.
I think that's fair because I think Ohio State fans are looking for a reason to be concerned about this game. And for most of the year, Michigan was so one-dimensional on offense that there was really no reason for concern. I mean, they went through quarterbacks, like three or four different quarterbacks. Warren and then Orgy and then Jack Tuttle, and now back to Warren. And now, they put up 50 against the team that Ohio State put up 31 against. But I still think he only threw for like 100 yards, though. No. He didn't.
The numbers for Davis Warren last Saturday, he attempted 35 passes, completed 26 of them for 195 yards. That's 5.2 yards per pass attempt. That is. They don't have a downfield passing game, which is the biggest reason I think that Ohio State's going to win this game. I mean, they just don't.
I agree, but I did see the Moore comment, and he's kind of right. He said, I believe today, they always say we can't throw the ball, and then we throw the ball against them. And there's some truth to that. I mean, I don't think that they've really been, compared to Ohio State, who's this high-octane passing game, Michigan the last few years has not really been thought of as, they're more like this line of scrimmage,
right?
Pound the ball, throw it if you have to. We're not terrible passing, but, we can be efficient. So I think that's what he's relating to. Now, they also had some pretty good quarterbacks doing that the last
McCarthy was
years.
terrific.
And this guy, what they have now is not. But, we've been around, we've all been around a long time in watching games. And, in these rivalry games, guys can kind of step up. And that's why there's a little bit of trepidation
There's always going to be trepidation in this game because it's the game. I mean, I saw
Right,
the
but I
point
mean,
spread.
like factually, they Michigan. I wouldn't say they have no offense or can't throw the ball. I wouldn't go that far.
Well, Colston Loveland's a really good player. He and Tyler Warren are the best tight ends in the Big Ten, and I don't think it's even close from what I've seen before. I mean, I can't say I've seen all the tight ends, but I mean those guys are special. They just don't have the wideouts that scare you. But I also think that if you're a Michigan fan, you take some hope in the fact that Michigan's strength defensively is their defensive line. Mason Graham, and I mean they got some studs. And Ohio State's obviously got the makeshift line right now. So if Ohio State can't run the ball, and it's supposed to be really cold, it's not supposed to rain or snow or anything like that, but it's supposed to be like a high of 29 on Saturday, which can affect the passing game. I don't think it's supposed to be particularly windy, but still.
That holds. When I was looking this up today, that would be the coldest the game has been in Columbus since 2008.
Yeah. That could be a factor. So there are scenarios in which you can see how Michigan is in this game. And I was surprised the point spread is, I saw 20.5 or 23.5, which is, I mean, I would have thought it'd be like 17, 15, 17, something like that. Because, I mean, I was surprised to see that high because rivalry game and you're not having as many snaps anymore. And so you're just not having as many possessions. So I'm not giving betting advice. Don't take betting advice from me. But I was surprised at that line.
I mean, the Indiana line was, what was it, around 13? So that was basically, They were 2 touchdown favorite over a top 5 team, Michigan 6-5. So 3 touchdowns doesn't feel really, to me, I guess, terribly surprising. I mean, this game feels like you know what the playbook's going to be in a way. And that's no pun intended or reference to Connor Stallions there. But Michigan's going to grind out tough yards. They want to slow the pace down even more. They do have a pretty capable running back tandem with Donovan Edwards and Khalil Mullings. And they're going to eat yards and try to limit possessions and bleed clock. Northwestern came out of the gate doing that against Ohio State, and if Michigan can kind of muck it up and make it a 1-score game or keep it that way in the second half, anything can happen, I guess. But it doesn't feel as if in last year, I mean, there have been times, and you look back in 22 where they were able to take some shots and take some deep plays, and Ohio State, I mean, that's some of the conversation about blitzing and Jim Knowles dialing up pressure. Ever since that Michigan game in 22, they held back since that game, trying to simplify things and not bring the extra pressure, because Michigan took advantage of that, throwing the ball downfield with J.J. McCarthy. They are not built to do that this year. If they're going to win, it's going to be eating yards on the ground. And can Ohio State stop that? And can Michigan hold Ohio State in some short yardage situations when the other side of the ball is flipped? Because there were times Saturday against Indiana where Ohio State couldn't punch it in on 4th and 1. So if Michigan can make it a game in the trenches, maybe it'll be a little more competitive, and maybe they have a shot to win 4 in a row. I mean, crazier things have happened.
The idea, I mean, let's face it, Michigan has no pressure on them, and Ohio State has all the pressure on them. I mean, I know that it's not everything like it was last year in terms of the postseason, but the idea of losing to this Michigan team at home with this roster, it would be the 4th straight for Ryan Day. That would bring up questions that nobody on Ohio State wants to even think about. And, for Sherrone Moore, who beat Ohio State as a fill-in coach last year, there's no pressure on this team. None. I mean, they're going nowhere. They're going to some low-level bowl no matter what happens in this game. So they can just come in and play free and try to be the spoilers, whereas Ohio State is, I mean, they're just like frothing at the mouth for this game. And we've seen how that can go. When you are frothing at the mouth and things start to go south, the panic can set in. I'm not saying that's going to happen. I think Ohio State wins this game comfortably because I think they're just a clearly better team. But if the scenario goes where Ohio State's the one that drops the punt, or something, weird happens and the ball bounces their way, and all of a sudden it's the 3rd quarter and it's a tie game, it's going to you're going to feel that in the shoe.
Absolutely. And I think I've got a 2-score game. You have the predictions up there, Joey? I
haven't done mine yet.
I'm not sure everyone's made it. I think I had something like 30.
I don't want to hear it.
What?
Over my ears.
Whatever. You can look and see what I picked.
I don't want to look.
Something like 30-17 or something.
I went 31. I went 31-9.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I might have had 10 in there or 13. But what is Bill doing?
I don't want to hear your scores. I haven't done mine yet. I don't want to hear
Bill has not made his formal prediction as the
I've not made my pick.
This podcast.
Well, whatever. That's not my problem.
Influenced by us.
I don't want to be influenced by you dopes.
Look at the integrity that you have.
Here's what I don't see. I don't see an Ohio State blowout. Now, define blowout, right? But I could see it. I could see Michigan making it very nervy on Ohio State more than I could see Ohio State blowing it open because Michigan's defense. Now, I don't know much about Michigan's secondary.
Well, that's the weakness, I think, to Michigan's secondary because Will Johnson, their star cornerback, has not played in the month because of turf toe. They've not been as strong back there. They've given up explosive plays through the air. They've allowed 33 pass plays of 20 yards or more, which is tied for third to last in the Big Ten. So they are not as strong in that area as they've been in past years. They're much stronger up front. They have guys who can bring pressure. As Bill mentioned earlier, their defensive tackle, Mason Graham's really good. Kenneth Grant's alongside him. So they are tough in the interior. And if they could get a rush and get after, maybe try to exploit the interior of Ohio State's offensive line, which is pretty inexperienced between your two guards and Austin Sarabeld and Integra Chabola, and you have Carson Hinsman moving to center to play Seth McLaughlin. I think that's a way you could draw Michigan, making it competitive is winning those matchups. But if Will Howard has time and has a chance to get the guys the ball in the perimeter, Mecca Buka, Jeremiah Smith, Carnell Tate, I mean, Ohio State is well positioned, I think, there to have some explosive plays and they haven't been that explosive this year, but I think they'll have some opportunities to take some shots.
Yeah, I mean, I think Ohio State could blow them out. I would not be surprised by that.
I totally think you could blow it out because it's the combination look where Ohio State is very highly motivated against a team that it's just a mismatch. You look at most of the matchups should favor Ohio State on paper, and you have a team that's highly motivated and that could play in their favor.
I think that refrain that has been going on for a couple of years. We've probably said the same thing, that I could see Ohio State blowing out Michigan, but Michigan won't, look 2-3 years ago, it was no one said that, Michigan would blow out Ohio State. And honestly, they did.
Well, they also had somebody telling them the plays.
Okay, well, I'm saying they blew them out. I don't really care how it happened.
It does matter how it happened.
Well, all right. Yeah, they did cheat. I'm with you on that. But my whole point is that I think it's just too nervy. I think it's too nervy. Now, I will say I'm with you guys that, I think it's not enough just to have a defensive line that stops the run because Ohio State's running game hasn't been all that the last couple games, and they've still won handily. Right. So just because you can stop the run doesn't mean it's going to be a close game. But I think getting pressure is a different story. I was going to say, I think a real key to this game is going to be interesting to watch. I think this is a play call game. This is a play calling game. It's Chip Kelly. Again, is he going to earn his pay? I mean, it's been looking pretty good, but I don't think you're just going to be able to line up and go straight at Michigan necessarily. I think you're going to have to be creative, and they have been. And I think you're going to have to do some things, some wrinkles. I do think that's where Michigan and Moore, didn't he play call last year? Isn't he kind of their offensive guy? And I was impressed by what he was doing.
Yeah, he called a great game last year.
He had the personnel to do it. But they're gonna try some things. They'll catch the Buckeyes off guard. So
the thing to remember last year is Sherrone Moore was really aggressive. Michigan went for it 3 times on 4th down. Ohio State did not. There was 2 situations. I don't know if people remember, but there was a time.
Yeah, everyone remembers, Joey. Everyone remembers the end of the first half.
You had the play even before that in the first quarter where it was 4th and 1 near midfield, and they opted to punt. And then you had the field goal at the end of the first half where they let the clock run down and attempted a 52-yard field goal from Jaden Fielding, and it missed. Ohio State had 2 chances to go for it on 4th and short. Didn't do it either. And then ever since that game, Ohio State has been really eager to go for it on fourth down. There was not even just fourth and short situations, but there was a 4th and 10. They went for it against Indiana and they got it. And this year they're going for it nearly 39% of the time on fourth down. In the previous 5 years, Brian Day's been the head coach, they were going for it 20% of the time. That is just a remarkable change.
I think that's a Chip Kelly effect.
Well, I think it's an analytics.
I think the comfort the two guys have with each other.
Yeah.
And Chip Kelly's, I don't know if he's a riverboat gambler, but I think he's confident enough in his play calling that 4th and 10, 4th and 2, whatever. And
Ryan Day is confident in Chip Kelly's play calling.
Right.
That's probably his biggest issue.
He doesn't have the burden of trying to pick the perfect play and also trying to decide whether they should go for it in the first place on fourth down. And then, as Bill said, they also are using an analytics group to provide them data. And the analytics guys always say in those situations, or not always say, but often advise for you to go for on fourth down that the risk is worth it. I guess my broader point with the fourth down situation is what kind of coach, what kind of game plan will we see from Ryan Day in the game? Because you think back, last year felt tentative at times with those fourth down calls. Is this a game where you just let it hang and you put pedal to your metal and you go for it in some of those fourth down spots? The way he has called the game and the way they've managed the game weeks 1 through 11 suggests that they'll be eager to go for it. They'll take their shots. They'll be aggressive on fourth down. But I mean, Rob, you've seen Michigan games before going back to the 90s where the game is sort of another entity. And how does that change what you do play calling wise? I think if you're a well-coached team, it shouldn't maybe change what you would do, but sort of here we are.
I will say that all the talk about this is its own entity. That is true to some degree. There have been outlier games and games that came out of nowhere, especially in the 90s. But this century, for the most part, the games have gone according to form. There haven't been a ton of upsets. Even the last 3 years, and again, you have the Connor Stallions effect for 2 of them. Michigan was a top 5 team. They were really good.
Right. Yeah.
Nobody would have been shocked that Michigan beat Ohio State. They were really good. And so this year they're not. I mean, this year they're a very mediocre. This is a Brady Hokish team that they've got. This is not, a late edition Jim Harbaugh team. They lost so many guys. This is going to be like Ohio State next year, except probably worse because they didn't really use the transfer portal. Ohio State will reload more than Michigan did. They lost almost to everybody. But still, the other funny thing about this game is if you look at the NFL draft, like picks, the projections, the first several players from this game will be Michigan players. It's Colston Loveland, it's Grant, it's Mason Graham. Those are all higher ranked draft picks, first-round draft picks than anybody from Ohio State. Ohio State's got quantity. They have a bunch of guys who go maybe late in the first round, early second, whatever. But in terms of the top of the draft, I think the first 3 guys are probably Michigan guys.
Yeah,
what's the X factor?
Will Johnson.
Well, I will add this to what, Bill, you were saying about the game being an entity into itself. In this century, just to bear that out, the last time an unranked team won in this game was 2004 when Ohio State upset 7th-ranked Michigan. They were unranked at that time in the game. You look back at the other times, Ohio State played unranked Michigan in 17, won 14-13. Michigan was unranked. Ohio State won both of those games. Ohio State was unranked in 11. Michigan won that game. Ohio State was unranked in 10-9 and 08. Ohio State won those games. Or Ohio State was ranked in 10-9 and 8. Michigan was unranked and won those games. So it has been very chalky in this century where you haven't seen sort of the unranked team come out of nowhere. I mean, you got to go back 2 decades for that. So just to add to.
Well, I agree, and that's why I have it a 2-score game for Ohio State. I mean, I picked them, but I would say that I don't know. It can be a nervy game.
Oh yeah,
and
there's tons of pressure on Ohio State, of course.
Yeah,
unless Ohio State has a comfortable halftime lead, it's going to be the place is going to be very very tense.
Yeah, I mean, like that's the other side of it too is the angst factor. And a lot of these guys, the seniors who all came back, Ryan Day, where you're not going to really feel safe until the clock is 0-0-0 or you're kneeling down, or maybe they won't kneel down. But that I think is the thing is just what happens is if they get behind or it's a slow start. They've been really good from playing behind. They had an early deficit at Penn State. They had the 7-0 lead against Indiana, but just the residualness of recent disappointment to Michigan. How does that affect their mental capacity? But some of it, I think it helps probably somebody like Will Howard, who I think has been a really good leader for them this year. He just does not flinch in some of these big moments. And he has not been a part of this rivalry in past years, and he doesn't have that hanging around his head in the same way, the here we go again kind of thing, where if they do fall behind, I think it is valuable maybe to Ohio State in this spot. Same with a guy like Caleb Downs, who's just as important on the other side of the ball.
What's the X factor on both sides, would you guys say? Ohio State, I think, Ingben.
Well, he can't get 3 pass interferences.
Right. I mean, that's going to be interesting. If I'm Michigan, I'm throwing deep down the sideline. I mean, right. You're gonna get one call probably, unless they put the mitts on Davison this week and he improves in that area. So that's a red flag for Ohio State. On the other side, like what are some X factors? I think special teams.
Well, Ohio State special teams are much better. I think Caleb Downs is. I mean, I think that he, as a safety who can trigger and be the guy that, look, remember all those runs that Michigan broke, Donovan Edwards was. I think if Caleb Downs is there, they don't break those runs because he just is the eraser. So I think he's a major factor in this game, especially in run support. But I think he's the best player on the team. For Michigan, if Davis Warren somehow plays the game of his life, then we got a game. But he is who he is.
Yeah.
I'd throw in Will Howard in the mix. The quarterback in this game has typically played well in recent years. I don't think really C.J. Stroud ever held them back. Right. I think Kyle McCord was okay last year. I mean, they got down early, and I think that pick was as much as on Marvin Harrison Jr. as McCord, and I think he had a role in bringing him back. But ultimately, the final drive fell short. I think just Howard's moxie and leadership, I think, is just important for the offense and the decision-making that he has. Some of the RPOs, if it's a close game or they're in some short yardage situations, they need him to run, I think it is valuable. So I think that to me is just a big way to get shape of a game, although picking a quarterback is a sort of a boring answer. But I was thinking about just the fact that he sort of has injected life into this team, the way he was talking post-game after the win over Indiana about how much he wants to win it for the seniors who had to deal with these losses, for Ryan Day. I mean, he just has a magnetic personality, and I think that could help steer them in a positive direction and get some good mojo on Saturday after all these guys have been through tough times against Michigan.
I'll throw another name out there, Travion Henderson. I think he's running the best he's run in his whole career, and playing the best, not just running them all, but pass blocking. And he is. There was one run yesterday that I watched when I watched the game again, and near the goal line, he got hit. I think the ball was at the 4. He got hit at the 7. Well, it spun out of the tackle and got to the 1. He's just running really, really hard. I think he could have a big game in this one.
Well, look, the team that wins the rushing battle typically wins this game. I mean, what's the you have to go back more than 20 years the last time that hasn't happened. That typically is the big determining factor. So Ohio State's going to need to be able to run the ball itself. One guy, another is probably also Carson Hinsman, the center.
Right.
He was the starting center last year against Michigan, but this is only his second game starting there this year. Can he make the calls, put them in right spots? And then also he's going to be going up against Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant a lot of times. So that's a tough draw for him. And also you have all the other assignments pre-snap.
Yep, good call.
Be a good one.
It is an interesting game.
Jeremiah Smith, we don't even need to mention him. I mean, he's going to.
And Emeka. And Cornell Tate.
I'm just saying Smith is like the spectacular play that sometimes this game, whether you've got Desmond Howard on the punt returner, there's some spectacular plays by spectacular players, Charles Woodson. And Smith, I was just thinking, guys, just for my last thing here is, every year there's this Ohio State receiver who's like like the best ever, who's better than the guys that came before him. I mean, you're thinking Marvin Harrison, oh my gosh, he's the best. Nobody could. And now you've got this kid, Jeremiah Smith, and no one's talking about Marvin Harrison being the best. Right. They're talking about Jeremiah Smith possibly being the best ever. It's pretty amazing and impressive that they just keep bringing in these guys. They're better than the one before.
Here's the other thing too. You're talking about Jeremiah maybe making a big play, and unless I'm missing something, but the last 3 losses Ohio State has had against Michigan, and I could be missing something, but it's never felt as if they've had some huge explosive play that just breaks the back of Michigan or really steers steals momentum.
That's why they've lost.
Yep.
Michigan's the one who's made those plays.
Well, they've lost for other reasons because, I mean, in 21, it felt like Michigan just kind of kept punching them and punching them and punching them and punching them, and they just the dam broke at the end. And then 22, Michigan had those explosive plays, and Michigan got up early last year and had that long fourth quarter drive where Ohio State's defense couldn't get off the field. But in none of those games was there just a play where Ohio State you'd snap your fingers and somebody was gone. And they could use that. I mean, most teams in college football could use that game, but it would I think be a huge mood lifter because the Downs punt return was such a big play in part because I think it just got the crowd totally engaged.
Well, remember last year Michigan had Mike Sanders still, and they had Will Johnson, a healthy Will Johnson, and Johnson's the one who made the interception on the pass to Harrison, right? That was Johnson, pretty sure. I mean, I guess there's a chance he could play. I don't know. I assume if he hasn't played in a month, he's probably not going to play this week. But Michigan had the players to do that. I think they're vulnerable this year to the passing game. If Ohio State can pass protect, and the offensive line's been much better in terms of pass protection than it has been in the run game. And Ohio State can just sit back there and pick you apart.
I do.
Well, Michigan's 6-5 for a reason. Let's not fool ourselves. But at 6-5, I look at almost like more like an 8-3 for this game. That's how I always see it. It's like I give them a couple more wins, not as many losses on both sides. If it was Ohio State, this game is an equalizer of sorts. That said, Bill still has to make his pick, so he doesn't want to hear what we did, Joey, what we picked. But I'd never say a comfortable win unless it's something like 40-something to 10 or whatever. But there'll be nervy moments. There always are. That's what this game is about. That's what makes it special.
Let's just maybe go out on this thought just as a 10,000-foot view of the rivalry. And you've written about this before, but last year was sort of the last of its era where one game could spoil an unbeaten season for both of these teams. Ohio State's, I think, effectively clinched the playoff spot with its win over Indiana. If they lose to Michigan, it would not prohibit them from making the field and winning national championship. It would eliminate them from winning the Big Ten, and obviously it would cost them in the rivalry itself. But it's a new chapter from that sort of thing. Are you wistful for past years where this was sort of all or nothing for a team like Ohio State? Because when they lost last year, you lost the rivalry game, you lost the Big Ten, you lost the national championship race. This year you could lose 2 out of those 3, but it's not singularly eliminating as it was in the past.
I think most years, let's say 10 years from now, I think you'll feel it even more. I think part of what the angst is this year is that 3 straight losses. I think that's what's keeping this rivalry right now, at least from Ohio State's side, is being sort of feeling the pressure, and it still means a lot because you've had to take it for 3 years. I think if it goes back and forth, Michigan wins one year, Ohio State wins the next or whatever, and there's not these streaks, then it loses a little bit of steam, depending on what's on the line. But I will say that I thought there would be, I'm not as disappointed as I thought I'd be. I really liked that this came down to one game, make or break everything. And I've been pleasantly surprised at still the amount of commotion and controversy with the 12-team playoff, like who's in, who's not, what needs to happen. I knew there'd be some of that. So with Michigan, they really can't totally spoil Ohio State's season. So take that off the table. They can make things very difficult for Ryan Day. Put that on the table. That's where this game I see. This is Ryan Day. If he's not feeling it, and I'm sure he is, the more of the pressure for anybody in this whole thing is on Ryan Day.
There's no question about that. There's just no question. And that's why players have already started talking about winning it for Ryan Day. That's a huge thing. There's definitely, he's the guy with the most pressure in this game. Sharon Moore has no pressure on this. Nobody expects Michigan to win this game. He beat him as a fill-in coach last year. So, it's all on Day. Because then, if you lose 4 straight and you make a quick exit in the playoff, then things get very tenuous. What does Ross Bjork do? What does the Ohio State brass do? Look, I think it's in some ways absolutely absurd that there's any talk about this for a number of reasons. One, Ryan Day's been a terrific coach. I mean, he's been those scandals. I mean, all that stuff. And there's a significant buyout in his contract. So, I mean, this is not
beating 2 top 5 teams this month.
Right. I mean, I just can't, but I also know the fan base, and the fan base will go crazy, and it'll go crazy depending on how they lose, if they were to lose. And again, I don't think they're going to lose. But if that were to happen.
To jump in on that, I don't even think it's like the fan base at large. I don't think totally that whether it's Ross Bjork or York or Gene Smith or whoever through the years the AD was. I think it's they feel pressure from your big donors, from your friends of the program, from your, whether it's Les Wexner or whoever it may be. Those are the people, the money people who apply pressure. The rumor when the Wolves own the Dispatch is, they applied pressure to Ohio State to get rid of Earl Bruce, 9-3 Earl Bruce. They didn't like Earl Bruce, and Earl Bruce got canned, the week of the Michigan game in 87?
Yeah.
So I think the fan base, and especially with social media today, that's no fun to have to deal with when you're in a position of power. But I think they really probably, like whether Ross or whoever it may be, the board, the pressure is from the people who have the money. It's always the way it's been.
They will be feeling. I mean, look, this would be such a weight off of his shoulders. I mean, if Ohio State wins as we expect them to do this week, it'll be such a load off of his shoulders. I mean, let's face it, he hasn't been able to really take a deep breath in a way, since 2021, because this weighs on you. In this game, when you lose this game, it stays with you. It's just like in the back of your mind. And so for 4 years, they haven't beaten them since 19. They didn't play in 20. So it'll be 5 years to the day, I believe. And that's a long time to go without beating your rival.
Yeah,
absolutely.
The losses in this rivalry age you.
Yeah.
Rob, I am with you. I thought I would miss the all or nothing stakes a little more, but I guess the rivalry to me has enough passion among the fan base, is I think enough heft.
And you know what?
It can kind of stand on its own well enough, and there's enough pressure on everybody where I'm okay with it. I think right now the magnitude doesn't feel as big, but it's still pretty big, I think, for.
I agree. And you can always spin the narrative. And the narrative this year, if you want to choose to see it this way, is an unranked Michigan can pull the upset. So there's always going to be something you can kind of, talk about and touch that makes it a little different. So should be a good one. Again, I expect Ohio State to win, but would not be shocked if it's close in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, I mean, they're Ohio State's favorite, but you got to go out and win the game. It's not a coronation.
Right.
Well, that does it. That was Rob Oller, Bill Rabinowitz. I'm Joey Kaufman. Thanks for joining us on another edition of the BuckeyeXtra Football Podcast, recapping IU, Ohio State, previewing Michigan, Ohio State. Should be a fun week, as always, leading up to the game, all the traditions. Make sure to visit us at dispatch.com/sports for all our written content ahead of the game. And hope you enjoy your Thanksgiving, holidays with family, and the game on Saturday.
Don't pull a hammy out there during your turkey bowl, people.
Speak from experience?
I do.
Thanks, everybody. Don't be Rob.
Be sure and subscribe to the Buckeye Extra podcast in the iTunes Store, the Google Play Store, or on Stitcher.